My name's Marj Boyer, and I'm today talking to Vikki Heywood, CBE, who was former Executive Director of the Royal Shakespeare Company and is now Chairman of the RSA. Thank you very much, Vikki, for your time. I know you're a very, very busy lady. I want today to talk about the Royal Shakespeare Company, but I want to put it in context. What is its purpose?
Its purpose is to produce the works of Shakespeare all year round in Stratford-upon-Avon and in London and around the world. It's the national theatre for the production of Shakespeare for the UK.
Right. And you were there for just short of 10 years. When you first went there, what did you want to achieve with it? What were you looking at in terms of the development of the organisation?
Well, that was pretty easy because it was in a lot of trouble. It had lost a lot of money in the previous year. It had a major capital project to redevelop this iconic national building in the middle of Stratford-upon-Avon, and that had hit the buffers. The project that they had been rejected, not just by the theatre industry, but also by English Heritage, by the local authority and by the funders. So it was in real trouble. And it had also, I think, to some extent, rather lost its special reason for existing. It had, for want of a better word, its identity, its brand had taken a hell of a punishment, partly because of the capital project and partly because it had set up a big change programme which was going to completely rationalise and repurpose the whole way that the organisation was functioning, and that plan had gone wrong. So there'd been a big clear out at the executive level, and a new artistic director had arrived and a new executive director had arrived. I should say, and it's important to sort of put on record in terms of the people that we succeeded, that actually all the ambition that they had within those plans was really good and strong. The problem that they'd hit was that they hit too many things going wrong all at once, and so everything became undermined, and as a result of that, just about everything started to wobble. So when I arrived, the company was in quite a lot of trouble. The board of directors were incredibly anxious, the major funders, the Arts Council, but also the company itself earns a lot of money. I mean, its turnover was about 30 million a year, 15 of which it was bringing in from box office, from restaurants, bars, shops and fundraising. And the confidence in the organisation had hit an all-time low. So it wasn't hard to see what the job was.
No. And therefore, going forward, what were the prime challenges?
One of the biggest challenges for me was that I run the Royal Court Theatre beforehand, which was also a national organisation, so you ended up on the front pages of the newspapers if things went wrong, just as you do at the RSC. But the RSC was much, much bigger as an organisation, and we had problems on so many fronts that it was really important for me as the leader of the organisation with Marj Boyer, the artistic director, to make sure that we were covering all the bases, but also we weren't getting into a sense of panic. The things that became important to me quite quickly were, first of all, to make sure that the organisation was in charge of its communications and its PR, and it wasn't responding every day to stupid bits of tittle-tattle in the press, to get the board back on side. So, beginning to wander around the building, being very, very proud of it, getting people to calm down, to focus on what was really important and to not worry about the things that weren't important. So it was grabbing the PR agenda. Then there was grabbing the finances. Green shoots were already beginning to appear, and one of the things to do was to be able to say to people, actually, you have already started to gain some control on the finances, and now this is what we need to do more of. The most important thing that we did was that we delegated the responsibility for financial management throughout the organisation, which hadn't been done before, so people had a sense that someone else had a lot more than them, everybody was hiding their contingencies, etc., etc. We democratised the entire process. We spent a lot of time sorting out the management process. The organisation has always described itself as being an ensemble, and that's describing a particular approach that it has to the work on stage. What Michael's vision was that he wanted to see that throughout the organisation, that everybody should have a sense that they're playing their part in the success of the RSC. And it's a large organisation spread over lots of different hubs, so people don't necessarily connect with each other very often physically, but have quite intimate and intense working relationships. We have offices, the company has an office in London and also has offices in Stratford, it's out on tour, and it's also working internationally. So it was very important to create a world where everybody had a sense of engagement. And there were all sorts of strategies that we put in place to do that. I suppose the main thing that we did was that we changed the management style from being one that was hierarchical into one that was consultative and inclusive. That didn't mean to say that we were operating some nice, friendly, warm place where nobody was making any decisions and where there wasn't a sense of what your lines of responsibility were, who your managers were. But we engaged people in a conversation internally about what the RSC was about and why their role was so important. And Michael opened up the artistic planning process so that people really had an opportunity to engage with him about the productions that we should be putting on. And that made an enormous difference to how the organisation functioned, because it could start to talk about itself as an ensemble, as a complete piece of work. Everybody felt that they really had a role to play and that they were part of one organisation. And that then started to really turn people's feelings about why they should support the organisation, whether as a member of the audience or come as an artist or come to work in the finance department.
It's obviously what you're doing and what you've been doing has worked very, very well. So were there areas where you thought you'd be successful and it didn't work out?
I think there were two areas that I found as real challenges. One was that working as part of a creative organisation and trying to talk about things like brand, talk about management culture, talk about style, were things that we had to own. So what absolutely didn't work in that organisation was me walking in and saying, you know, I think we should do it like Tate and Lyle or the National Theatre or the Royal Opera House. Everything had to be minted new, if you like, and I had to find methodologies to encourage people to really have a sense of ownership about something. And it's interesting, I've been talking about that at the RSA, which is also a very creative organisation, an enormously sort of disparate group of people, all of whom very, very bright, very intelligent, whether those are fellows or whether those are members of staff, and we've all got our own way of doing it, and we want it to be original. So trying to find ways where one would sort of steal the best of other people's ideas, but turn it into something that we owned, started at the beginning to feel like an enormous challenge, and actually by the end, I felt that we really had created something that was a bit different actually from something anybody else had done. The hardest challenge for me running a creative organisation was that it didn't seem to matter how much I tried to channel that creativity and make sure that we had always planned what we were going to do. We still tried to do too much. And we really came a cropper actually towards the end of my time with the RSC, when we were becoming immensely successful in terms of the number of productions we were doing. We'd come up with this really exciting way of touring our own work, which meant creating a whole auditorium as well as all the productions that went into it. We were taking that as a season to New York, producing a whole bunch of plays in repertoire. We also had the success of Matilda, which was transferring from Stratford-upon-Avon into the West End, and we were also running our own seasons in Stratford and doing a national tour. And interestingly enough, although the senior team would sit around and say, we're doing too much, and I kept saying to them, well, we must plan this so that we can do it all, or you as a team of people must tell me if you can't. We overloaded ourselves.
So if you look at it from a business point of view, that would probably be the equivalent of growing too fast, too quickly, without having the right mechanisms in place to support that growth.
Yes, I think that's true, and I think that is a real challenge if you're going through a period of change in an organisation and you're trying to get it back on its feet, because you're very aware of the kind of wolf at the door that can flip you back just as quickly to where your predecessors were. You know, there's no magic ointment that you've really got. It's a combination of the team that you've got, the luck that you're having, and a bit of your own nous and skill.
Yeah.
And if you've got a really bright team working for you, as I did, and anybody who's running an organisation, it isn't about them, it's about the group of people that you're with. I mean, we were talking about this earlier on, you know, I don't have all those individual skills. You know, I had a lawyer working to me, and financial people working to me, fundraisers working to me, marketing people working to me, PR people working to me, sets, costumes, all the rest of it. And you can only do the job of being the chief executive if you are, to some extent, across all of those things, but really what you're doing is enabling those people to work at their best.
Yes.
What's really hard is foreseeing those moments when everybody is wanting to do their best. Everyone's got their favourite projects, and it can't all necessarily be done at the same time. And in a period of growth, that is a classically challenging moment, I think, for a chief executive, as to which bits you bet and which bits you don't. And of course, creative organisations, like many other businesses, suffer from exactly the same problem, which is it's all fine, and then there's the other thing that comes along. There is the fantastic success that you have got to pick up at that moment. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges if you're running an organisation, is when to actually go with the flow of that extra thing, and when maybe you have to think about something else that was very dear to people that you have to let go.
Yes. From that experience, what were the lessons you learned?
Well, what I'm doing at the moment is that I'm chairman of various things, and I'm also mentoring some folks. And that's the thing that I found most useful, actually, is all those past experiences. And when I'm sitting and talking to people, helping them to think through exactly that challenge, and sometimes to see that challenge that's coming at them over the hill, because often you don't quite notice it at the time. In a sense, nothing that we did at the RSC could I say, well, I wouldn't do it again. And most of the time I would say I would have done it just like that. I think that the most important thing is to be able to retain a sense of perspective, and to allow yourself to be able to step back from it, and to watch that you are not pushing a particular agenda which has become your dearest project, and that you are really listening to what people are saying to you. I think I did get some messages that I wasn't listening to, and I think there were moments when I should have, instead of thinking I've got to walk into this room and push this thing on, I should walk into the room and think how perhaps I could pull it back a bit, and perhaps I sidestepped my responsibility to some extent as a leader, and just allowed my team to be able to promote all their own individual things that they wanted to do so much. I mean, I've always worked in organisations where I've really truthfully believed that what it is doing is critically important and making a difference. That's where I've got my own personal energy. And I suppose one of the first things I'd be saying to somebody is, what are your motivations? How are you getting a real sense of job satisfaction out of this job that you're doing? And making sure that the company they're running is really feeding them, because I think if it's feeding them, it will also be feeding their senior team. The next thing I would say is delegate, 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 and that is truthful and honest. I think there's quite a lot of times where people run their teams in terms of giving them the ball and then taking the ball back and giving them the ball and taking the ball back, and you've got to be a little bit scared, actually, that your senior team are made up of people who not only could do your job but think they could do your job. They need to really challenge you, and you must listen to them and allow them to do so, and to do so effectively, and demonstrate to them where you have changed because of the value that they have brought to you in any situation. Because I think that mutual respect is actually something that really works. The other thing I would say is be seen to care and really care to the company. You know, there's the old adage of walking the job. I mean, you can do all those things. But the fact is that how you behave is noticed by everybody. And if you want to test it, change one bit of your behaviour and see what happens around you, whether it's the time you come in or the time you go home or sitting at your desk eating your lunch or doing your emails at 1 o'clock in the morning. Just take one thing and change it and see. And if you think about that multiplied throughout all your staff, this is a big lesson I learned from Michael.
True.
How you go into the building in the morning, which ways you arrive, which ways you leave, all of those things can make an enormous difference to how the entire organisation functions. And I guess the last thing I would say is make sure that as far as possible the identity of the organisation is a 360-degree thing. That it isn't just about little packs that people get with their wage slips, but that it is actually something that they believe in, whether they are the cleaner or whether they are a member of your executive team, that they've got a reason for getting out of bed every day and that they can describe the organisation and the principles and the beliefs and the values of that organisation to anyone, whether that's their friend in the pub or whether it's their colleague. Because if they feel that the organisation has got that identity and they are motivated as part of it, then your job becomes a million times easier.
I think that's a great note to end on. Vikki Heywood, CBE, thank you very much for your time. Much appreciated.
Thank you.